I said, Judge, you know, you may not realize it, but every time you address all the lawyers, you say gentlemen. And I paused, and I presumed that he would immediately say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I just didn't realize it. Well, he didn't say anything. My mother was a legal secretary my whole life, but I never thought of being a lawyer. It just never occurred to me. And so I became a teacher. My father's parents were Greek immigrants. They never learned to speak English. My father was the first child born in America, and my grandfather was a coal miner for the Union Pacific Railroad in Rock Springs, Wyoming. But they had a great value for education. My father didn't quite graduate because he joined the Army in World War II before the draft and then never ended up finishing college, but he had about 3 years. I graduated in 1968. And I felt that really you had 3 tracks. You could be a secretary or a nurse or a teacher. I ended up getting a Master of Arts in Teaching at Vanderbilt, and then I taught for 3 years before I went to law school. I entered law school really on a lark. I mean, I didn't know if I could do it. I mean, I'd done better on the LSAT than I thought I would do, but I didn't know that I could do it. I didn't know if I would like it. And I'm really not sure I would have finished law school had I not started clerking after my first year for that small firm that I loved so much. When I entered Vanderbilt Law School, each class was about 170 people. And for many years, Vanderbilt had basically a quota of 3 women per 170 in the class. So when I entered in '73, there were 3 women in the 3rd year class. There were about 16 in the 2nd year class, and I believe 33 in my class. And so there was 1 women's restroom for students that was very inconveniently located that had 1 stall. And we simply couldn't all get in there in between classes. So we went to the administration and they said, well, you can use the administrative suite women's restroom, which was just as inconveniently located in the opposite direction and only had 2 stalls. So that didn't work either. And so we just basically took over the most centrally located large restroom that was a men's restroom. And we put a sign on the door and said women, and we just started using it. And the men didn't give it up easily. Sometimes you'd come out of a stall and there might be a man using the urinal. The urinals were still in there, of course. But that only lasted about a week. And anyway, the administration caved and they gave us that restroom. But I mean, I didn't do it single-handedly. It was all of us, and it was the Women Law Students Association, and I'm just glad that we succeeded. We had formed a Women Law Students Association with the mentorship of Martha Craig Daughtry, who was the only full-time woman law professor at Vanderbilt Law School when I started in 1973. She mothered all of us, and then she went on to the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals, and then the Tennessee Supreme Court, and then the Sixth Circuit. I was in private practice here, and when I got the call to be an assistant U.S. attorney and basically take the women's slot at the U.S. Attorney's Office at that time, it just blew me away. I couldn't imagine working for the federal government. I don't really know why that was such a big deal, but it was enormous to me. And so I was very lucky that the U.S. attorney, when I went to him after about 6 months and I said, I really want to be a trial lawyer and I really want to be in court, can you please give me some criminal work? And I was very lucky because he gave me our northeastern docket here in the Middle District of Tennessee around Cookeville. But anyway, I was very lucky that I had a U.S. attorney that was willing to let me try cases and do criminal work. there was a prosecution of a former governor of the state of Tennessee, Ray Blanton. They never could find enough evidence to prosecute him on the pardons and paroles scandal, but they did have evidence of his selling liquor licenses to his friends in exchange for a share of the profits of new liquor stores. It was in the early 80s. There were probably maybe 2 other women doing any kind of litigation that wasn't domestic relations in Nashville at that time. It was the front page of both newspapers every day for about 6 weeks. We got convictions of all 3 defendants, including the governor. And it really set me up as a woman who was tough and could do litigation. When I went into private practice after that, my senior partner would always introduce me to clients who might be a little bit hesitant to have the woman lawyer working on their cases. He always said she was the Blanton prosecutor. And that, of course, immediately gave me credibility. The women of my generation are really referred to as trailblazers very regularly because we did start the Women's Bar Association in Nashville, and then a few years later the Tennessee Women's Bar Association. And the first CLE we did was one that we patterned after one in California that they did all the time, and it was called So You Want to Be a Judge. Now, I do believe in the state courts, at least in Nashville, there are more women judges than men judges. We were very successful. I've been on the district court bench 25 years, and I remember in the early days, I would just be so thrilled when, if by chance in a lawsuit, I had women on both sides of the case, because it was kind of unusual. And I would, come back in chambers and say, wow, I had a woman prosecutor and a woman defense attorney in this case, or a civil case where I had women on both sides. And now, of course, it's just commonplace, and it's very gratifying. And I think it's important that we tell our stories, however, and not take it all for granted.